Namaskar and good evening. So we are live now on YouTube and Facebook on behalf of Chandigarh Literary Society. And the past year or a year and a half, has made us quite habituated to these YouTube and Facebook lives. So we continue with the tradition even this evening. And today we are in conversation with a seasoned writer. Now, we've had the opportunity to chat with her many a time before as well on the CLS platform. And we continue to look forward to many, many more conversations that we are going to have in the future with her as well. So many know of her as an IAS officer, but most of us are quite well versed with all that she's given to the literary world, right? Fragrant Words, Are You Prepared for a Disaster, and The Haunting Himalayas are just a few of her books. And of course, all of these are much loved and revered by readers all across. And today, it's all about her latest book, which is her sixth book titled as Asari, spelled as Asari. So, before I begin the question and answer session and before I actually begin the conversation, I have a question for everybody who's watching us right now. Can you take a guess at what Ashariri really means? Okay. So, no cheating. I know you can Google it and I know you can find out within a second, but then that would be no fun, right? So, I just want you to take a guess, write in the chat box what Ashariri means. And then we'll see about that. There'll be an answer hidden in the conversation as well. So, I'll lead you right up to it. But before that, thank you so much, Rajni ma'am, for joining us this evening. And it's been wonderful to chat with you once more. I hope you're doing well, and we'll get into the conversation slowly and slowly.
Thank you so much, Niharika. It's indeed a pleasure to be back. Chandigarh is my hometown. It's my Karam Bhumi. It's a place I love, and nice to be with the CLS, even if it's virtual. Always a
I
pleasure.
know. I mean, I'm just hoping that we'll get back to the real world real soon. But till then, I think the virtual world is all that we've got. So, we've always met about one book or the other, and we've spoken so much at length about what you've written in those books. Yet, I think we've never talked about your journey as a writer on the whole, right? So, would you want to quickly take us through your journey as a writer, how writing came to you, and how is it evolving and progressing with time?
Wow. It's a long journey and a very interesting one. So, as long, I think, um, ever since I could hold a pen, I've written. I've written for myself. And I mean, even in school, I used to write for the literary magazine. I would write, I mean, those were the published ones. But by and large, I had this dread diary, and I used to have a lot of scraps of paper on which I would write. But coming to the published works, um, when did I begin to publish? I think I continue to write for myself, but when did I feel that I needed to actually share what I wrote was, I think, when I was joint secretary in the Ministry of Animal Husbandry and Agriculture. I was looking after dairying at that point of time, and was traveling because I've always felt that you can't just sit on a chair and a table and understand about the subject that you need to create policy or develop policy for. So I was traveling and trying to understand the various indigenous breeds of India. And I think my first recollection is of being in Sikkim, where I went to a monastery, and there was this very fragrant smell out there, and I wanted to know what it was. So I asked what it is. They said it's actually the diya that we light. It's made from the butter of a particular cow called Siri, a local cow called Siri, and a Siri feeds on the grass. That's so it smells very nice of lavender and so on and so forth. And they believed, it's the belief that they had, that if you light this lamp with this particular butter, then all the negativity goes out and positivity comes in. A little later, I went down to Karnataka, to Mysore, where they have a different breed called Amrit Mahal. And the story that was told to me there was about Tipu Sultan having 10,000 heads in his army, where the Amrit Mahal would carry the armor for the army, and they could travel for 2 to 3 days at a stretch without much water and fodder. And then I went and I mean, I met large number of stories across India because there are 32 breeds. There were 32 stories of how these breeds were actually so special. And I thought to myself, if I don't put this down somewhere, then it really is a loss to the world. I thought to people who needed to understand about it, and I started to write in 2012 or maybe 2011, end of December 2011. So I brought out the first coffee table book, Kamadhenu. Similarly, my work again took me to Are You Prepared for Disaster, the book that you mentioned, which is the Bloomsbury publication, which is basically after the Kerala floods. And a lot of work went into the Kerala floods. First time Kerala was hit by a major flood, in 2016. Oh no, sorry, forgive me. It was in 2018. And what happened was 2000. I think a first time in 100 years, maybe after 1923, they had this major episode, and we were actually kind of, because I was in MHA looking after disaster management, we were actually helping the state to manage the entire relief process and the rescue. After this happened, the episode is such that we had a small interaction with some school teachers of Kerala and Kodagu, which is in Karnataka, where they had a major landslide. And one of the questions I asked those teachers was that suppose there were children in your custody, and if it were to, you have a lightning flash and you find that a thunderstorm is expected, what would you do? And I gave them 4 options. Would you put them under a tree? Would you take them inside the classroom? Would you give them various options? But not a single one of those, about 100 odd teachers could respond. It doesn't end there. I came back and told the story to my sister and her friend, who's a middle level officer in one of the multinationals. And when they heard it, they both looked at me and they said, well, Didi, what should they have done? We also don't know. That kind of set me thinking. And I said, it's a fact that a lot of people don't know how to be prepared for a disaster, how to reduce the risk of themselves, their families, of those people who they are in charge of. And that's where this other book came up. I think it's somewhere here. Yeah, there it is. Are You Prepared for a Disaster? The books that I've written are of 3 kinds. One is the kind where I felt what I had said needed to be shared with the world at large, with public, with my readers. The others are books I wrote for myself, poetry. Now, poetry is something that's very difficult to share. And so the first one was Clouds and Beyond, and the second one was the one that you mentioned, Fragrant Words. And I'm going to read. I'm going to read from the forward to Clouds and Beyond and tell you how it got shared. So when I was preparing for a talk like this with Kamadhenu, my first book, the publisher Shobit said that, I've shared with him a few words. I said, do you think this sounds nice or something else should I say? And I gave him 2 or 3 options. And he says, very nice words. The verses, actually. So who wrote them? I said, well, I did. He said, well, that's what I want to do. May I publish them? I said yes, but poetry is very difficult to share. I mean, it's your own thing. You write
It's
for
close to
yourself.
your heart, right?
Very close to your heart, and to put your heart out there on a platter for someone to prod and either regard or disregard is tough. And I actually continued to hold on to it and did not say final yes until I heard this from Ruskin, a friend of mine, Ruskin Bond, and I'll read. And he said, the last time I had to listen to the poetic, I'll quote from this, the forward of this. The last time I had to listen to the poetic outpourings of a serving bureaucrat, I had to sit in an uncomfortable chair for almost an hour, nodding my head in polite appreciation until I nodded off altogether. So it was with this little trepidation that I turned to the folder containing Rajni Sekhri Sibal's verses, which looked up at me from my desk the other day. I'd sent it to him to read and tell me what he thinks about it. Should it be published? Should it not? And I know him. He can just talk like this and say it's not worth the paper it's written on. So then what he wrote is what urged me to actually publish. He said, I need not have worried. They were really quite charming, elegantly written, sensitive, thoughtful, soul searching, at times even lyrical. They reminded me of the poems of Sarojini Naidu, the Nightingale of India. Not that Rajni would want to be called a nightingale, it sounds a bit old fashioned, and old fashioned she is not. But her poems have a haunting quality, inspired perhaps by the mist of a Missouri winter, falling leaves, frosty dawns, and rosy sunsets. And so when he said that, I said that's where my poetry, my journey with anthologies began. It was Clouds and Beyond, followed by Fragrant Verses. And then the next book was actually As is Asari, on account of the lockdown. These books are basically, I think, the scientist in me, because I studied science until I went on to do economics for my post graduation and psychology as well, uh, had always believed and looked at things which are empirically verifiable, which I can see, which I can hear, which I can feel as the truth. It's only during lockdown I realized that somebody else's truth, which I don't know, which is beyond my ken, is also worth knowing. And that's where the Haunting Himalayas came. And the final growth of this Rajni, from one who is a disbeliever to one who actually believes in understanding, wanting to learn, wanting to grow about things I don't know a thing about. Is Asari. This is where Asari began. That's my journey, and that's how Asari came about.
I'm so glad I asked you that, and I noted that you made a distinction between being a writer and being a published author. So I guess somewhere all of us are just writers, we pen down thoughts, we write what's on our mind, and it's a way to detach with problems as well. It does not mean that we are not writers just because we haven't published all of that. So now, coming to the next thing that I wanted to ask you about poetry and prose. Like you mentioned, you've written in a number of genres, I would say. Your topics have been wide and varied. But which is the genre that you choose to challenge yourself in? And is there anything at all about writing that challenges you as such?
Wow, a good question. But then I'm going to take you back to the fact that I love to write. I love books. I always have the smell of books, the feel of paper, the whole excitement that builds up till you read the end. And I've always loved to write. So writing is a passion. It's something I do I enjoy doing during the early mornings. I'm actually a morning person. And I write, as I said, for the joy of it. I mean, when you write for the joy of it, I think the words flow. It doesn't matter what genre. I've never planned genres. I've never said today I'm going to sit down and write poetry or today I'm going to sit down and write prose. So it's takes my what occupies my mind, what takes up my imagination is what I put now. Of course, I use the laptop, but earlier it was pen to paper. And no, there's no challenge there. The challenge is in the sharing. Prose is easy to share, and especially nonfiction. When you're writing about your work, when you're writing about things that are factual. Poetry is basically your heart and your soul, and that you take a while, and you really are, as I said earlier, putting your heart there on a platter, uh, and it's like when you watch your child go to school and see their performance. It's like that when somebody picks up your poetry book and says, "Oh, nice!" It gives you excessive joy. Excessive joy if it resonates. If it doesn't, there's a slight twinge somewhere. So the challenge is with poetry in terms of genres. They're publishing poetry, not writing it.
Writing. I
Yeah.
think your heart, it just starts beating faster, because it's in someone else's hand when they're reading your poetry, and you just don't know how they're going to deal with it, right? I think it's poetry is also the most deepest form of expressing yourself. I mean, you get poetic license as a writer, and you can just put words here and there. So I totally get it. I totally understand where that is coming from. But now coming to your book, Asariri. So now I'm going to lead our viewers to the meaning of Asariri. I had talked to them about it before we began. And in fact, we did get one interesting answer as well by Colonel Chima. He said that I think it's something to do with exploring consciousness. So, how did you get to choose this title? Asariri actually means a voice from the sky. It's a disembodied voice, and it's another word for Akashvani. And Asariri is a Tamil word, so if I just may say that for our viewers, and we don't use it much in daily parlance. How did you choose this title for your book?
Wow. So Asariri is indeed the central character. The protagonist is a girl called Nisha, in fact, the story of Nisha as she grows from a sad, uh, questioning kind of person who questions life and death and sorrow, and grows out of that into someone who is more evolved with the help of this friend Asariri. And Asariri so is the main character in the book, and that's why the book is called Asariri. And it's not Asariri is basically Sanskrit, and of course it's used in Tamil and in Malayalam and a lot of other languages. Hindi somehow, Hindustani as we understand it, we kind of left it behind. But indeed, Colonel, I think you've got by and large the gist of it. But let me quote from the book to tell you who Asari is, if I may. Um, yeah. So, in the words of Bua, that's the aunt of the protagonist, she says an Asariri, and that's the basic form of Asariri, is a friendly, disembodied voice, a strong genetic tie across the ether, a cauldron of the combined wisdom of your ancestors, a pool of ancient knowledge, beliefs, and way of life. Asariri is the friend of the protagonist, is her philosopher and a confidant throughout the book. They journey together through her growth from a morose and angry daughter immersed in self-pity and sorrow to a wise and serene person, happy and content with her life, armed with the ability and the desire to live a life full of life. To actually explain a detailed understanding to come to a detailed understanding of Asariri, I'm going to read from the Kathopanishad, second Vali, and if I speak in Sanskrit, Charireshwan Vastesh Vastistatam, meaning we always have the Asariri with ourselves. And it's again from out of the book. If I introduce Asariri, it's a difficult concept because this is what even the aunt says, and she says there are things profound, difficult to realize, and hard to understand, both sweet and subtle, melodious and tranquilizing, not grasped by mere logic, visible to a discerning mind, comprehensible only to the wise. And Asariri is a strong genetic tie across the ether, and it conveys what the deceased could not express on account of a sudden demise. If you care to listen, the Asariri also passes on wisdom from the past. And when a person dies young or suddenly, the soul is troubled by all that was left unsaid and undone. The soul, in the form of a disembodied voice, the Asariri communicates with those who are left behind. Now, Asariri in the book is rather poetic. So he speaks, she has no gender there, speaks in verse. And so if you like poetry, you like how Asariri speaks.
Well, I think Asariri also carries the wisdom of generations, like you mentioned. So you say this very profound line in the book that it's a link to your forefathers. Now, when you're etching a character like that, which has no bodily form, which has, it's just a voice, right? What is your reference point going to be? So, for example, if you were writing about a wizard, or if you were writing about a magic school, you would know you could refer to something like Harry Potter. But for a character like Asariri, where do you go? Where does your reference begin and end?
Okay, I think I spoke about the manner in which I write. Just said it in a sentence, but let me just expand then so it'll answer your question. I don't write as it's there's no process in the way I write. I don't, sit down and say, okay, I have to do. In fact, if you were to tell me, put me in a room and close me, and that would be my challenge, and tell me, okay, write 5,000 words of let's say any one subject, and do it within, this kind of parameter, and do it within a day or 2 days. I think it'll come out very stilted. It won't be what I mean. It won't be what I said. So I need my space. I need my freedom to express. And a lot of time, my characters are my own. They all characters have some part of us, of myself, the author. Every author has leaves behind some part of herself or himself in the character, and sometimes it's borrowed from real life. You don't even know, without even knowing, you find a lot of that. Asa really has a lot of my father in it, so who was a bit of a philosopher in his own right. He had no religion, but he was a person who had a soul. And he died very young. He was juvenile diabetic and died rather young. So there's a lot of my father in Asari. There's also a lot, the wisdom that he draws from, that pool of wisdom is basically the ancient scriptures, a large number of scriptures. And a lot of what I've written in the book is partly my reflections, early morning reflections jotted down on pieces of paper over the years, which I collected during COVID and put together in this form. And a lot of the conversations I had with my father in the, around dawn, over pots and pots of tea. We had tea drinkers. Yeah. So I think that's Asari. Thank you.
So, because you spoke about your father, I think this has to be the next natural question for me. In a lot of places, Asariri is also like a parent. So he or she is someone that you would turn to for advice. So the first conversation that the protagonist has with Asariri is about parenting. She wants to know if she's a good parent or not. I just want to know your thoughts on that, on comparing Asariri to a parent, and how did that come about? And like you said, it has a lot of your father in it.
The wisdom that it expresses, it has my father. It also has some the Katha Upanishad, the Brahma Upanishad, a bit of Nanak, a bit of whatever whatever I've learned through life, whatever reflections I've had of my own. But that's a very interesting point. It's rather an interesting observation. Is Asa really a parent? I don't know. Asariri is a friend. Asariri is your internal conscience, as sometimes it's something that everybody has. Now you just have to listen, and I think I can't express it better um, than something I read, and I'm going to quote from there once I find it. It's actually from which basically says that you just need to, if you need to seek knowledge, if you need to understand yourself, you need to look deep within. Asariri is within. And it's more like a friend, a confidant, a parent, yes, in terms of the fact that I don't think who could be a better friend than a parent. In all the various relationships we go through in life, the only relationship which actually is one which has unconditional love, one where the parent is happy to see you go beyond herself or himself. I don't know anybody else. Sometimes a very good teacher would like to see you go beyond herself, but mostly it's parents. And there is no rivalry. There's just constant support. There is affection. There is a desire to do best by your child. Sariri could be a parent. Yes, it's how you see it.
Right. Yeah, I think parents are people you would turn to when you want answers to questions like what is happiness or what is anger. And you address that also in your book, right? So, what really is happiness according to Asariri? And does Asariri have any way in which we can be happy without material possessions or without attaining a goal for that matter?
Well, uh, I don't know if you've read the book completely, Niharika, but I guess you have, because this is a question that the Nisha, the protagonist, asks Asariri, and she says uh, she wants to know what is happiness, and she actually begins by saying that I think I'm blessed, and he turns around and says, "Of course you're blessed for various reasons. I mean, the very fact that you're alive, you're blessed." And and if you want to be happy, in fact, it ends with, so permit yourself to be happy. When you know you're blessed, permit yourself to be happy. You have this one life. So she said, what do you mean by permit myself to be happy? I mean, doesn't everyone want to be happy? So this is what Asari says, and I quote: true, everyone wants happiness, only they look for it where it does not lie, amongst externalities and it eludes them. For happiness is neither attached to nor dependent upon any event or person. Happiness is neither attached to nor dependent upon any event or person. And a quick read through is, you think you'll find happiness when you get good grades, or you have branded shoes, or when you have a fancy car or a villa in the woods. Maybe you'll find your happiness when you meet the right person or have children of your own, or when you have an ideal boss or an apartment downtown. Tomorrow may bring happiness in is an oft repeated thought. For then the rain may go, and so on and so forth. And money may bring happiness, is the hope of a poor man. But when he becomes rich, he's still a poor rich man. And then he goes on to say that's the example of Midas, how you can be rich and still be unhappy. So when the question that you asked, so how do you actually seek happiness? I mean, how do you get happiness if it's there within you? So he says, Asari, he says, don't look for happiness. When you stop looking for happiness outside amidst potential gains in a distant future, and if you stop seeking it altogether and value and embrace life as is, the happiness within is felt without. Stop chasing your own shadows, just turn your back to it and face the sun. Your shadow will stop racing ahead of you. Have you ever seen that? When you follow the shadow, it keeps racing
True. Yeah.
ahead of you. And when you turn your back to the shadow, it will follow you instead. So it is with happiness. Sheer Ananda. Leave it be, and you will experience it like a shy bird that alights lightly on your arm once you have stopped pursuing it.
So, I remember reading this
More,
bit right
but
in the beginning.
but I'm going to I'm going to leave most of it, how it comes about and what happens later, to those
True,
who'd like to
true.
read it. It's on Amazon, and I think you can just download it. It's a Bloomsbury publication.
Absolutely. I think it makes for a fantastic read, and we've got a very special guest this evening as well, waiting to be in conversation with you. Good evening, sir, and great to have you on this conversation. I think you should ask ma'am a few questions now.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
Very well, Vivek. How are you? Good to see you.
Very well, ma'am. Thank you. And I've been listening to your conversation. It's wonderful to read your thoughts. I've been through your books, and a striking question that comes to me, one that has to be asked, is that in the humdrum, in the routinized lives that we lead, and how, if I can use the word, ma'am, how sarkari some of us become at times, and to think in an elevated way with consciousness which is obviously distinct from what we are going through every day, and to detach yourself from that humdrum life, and to come up with words and lines and thoughts and pages like this takes a lot of rare quality. So how and where did you discover that quality in yourself, and how did you develop it so that maybe you can inspire others who may want to be like you?
Thank you for saying those nice words, Vivek. And I've known you for a while, so I know you mean them. That's the hallmark of
Absolutely.
somebody who's true. You only say what you mean, right? And I think that's the one thing that I have um, treasured all through life. It's the word. It's that words alone mean nothing. It's your ability to live what you believe in, to say what you actually mean, and to do what you have meant to do. I think I am convinced of one thing, which I'm saying nothing new, but it's worth sharing since you asked that question, that we have just one life. We have just one uh, way of living it. It's a choice that we have. Uh, and once you are, the day you're born and the day you go are two prefixed dates. What you do in between is what really makes you who you are. And I choose to leave behind some footprints in the sand without even wanting to actually do anything spectacular. To me, every minute needs to matter. And when I say every minute needs to matter, it doesn't need to matter just to myself. I need to do something that I grow myself, and I also have had the luxury, the absolute luxury of being able to touch so many lives because of my career, and I think I've felt blessed. The ability to be able to make changes to people's lives, every life that I've touched, and I think um, that's a great blessing. Thank you.
Absolutely, ma'am. I agree with you that you are blessed, and to be able to reach out to so many people with these deep thoughts and express them so well is a rare ability. And then people don't identify that often with the career that you have led, or anyone who is into writing and expressing creatively at the same time as serving. But my next question is a little more deep, and it is about your book. And I was going through the concept of Ashariri, and I was amazed at this voice from beyond, which is speaking to us. And I was touched by the mention of your father and your deeper thoughts. And I also wanted to ask you this. So, what should normal people think about those who have gone? And it's a slightly um, maybe a question of pathos, sadder kind of element of life. People have gone, and often those who lose their near and dear ones, they tend to remember only the last few days and the illness and the that difficult part of their exit, and they don't really focus on the happy times and the vibrations that they are unwittingly emitting to those souls are those of regret and worry, not worry, but feeling low, and especially for the first few months after somebody's gone. It's natural, it's human. But then, do you think it is possible to detach oneself from that kind of feeling and send love and vibrations of, I'm sure they reach those souls. So, can we look at life and exit from this world in the larger picture? And how can we do that? And how can we send those vibrations to those souls who have gone beyond? It's a spiritual kind of question, but I'm sure you've thought about it, ma'am.
Yes, Vivek, it's a question that we all have to actually answer for ourselves. But if you want what I think about it, I think I'd love to share what I feel. I'm convinced that there is much more. There are many more realms beyond what we perceive, what you see, what you hear. Now, the younger Rajni, the younger me, who had, I was just sharing before you came, that anything that was empirically verifiable was all that made sense to me. Anything that I could not see with my eyes was
Yeah,
nonsense.
we were all like that, ma'am.
We've all been like that, and I think I did mention that my father had no religion. But he was a very modern man, not in a Western concept, but very modern in terms of the values that he passed on to us. And he would always think that we would pick our own religion as we grew, and wanted to leave us like that, and to be educated enough. And by educated, again, not literate, educated as in wiser. It took me a while to comprehend that there are, besides the various realms that are beyond our ken, which we cannot really touch, which are there at the edge in a fuzzy kind of manner. When you're up in the hills and in the Himalayas, kind of that fuzziness is a little less gray. It's more clearer. When you're on your own, when you just sit by
Absolutely.
yourself, it's clearer. And you also realize that besides this realm, there are also these connections that we have. There are these soul connections. So the very fact that we're talking, you and I can see you. I saw. I know she's still there, but I saw Niharika, and there may be a large number of people out there in this virtual gathering. There is a reason we are here. There is also a reason that you and I speak. My mother is my mother, and my daughter is my daughter, and somebody else. So these links are uh, not just arbitrary. They have this network is a blueprint which is a little beyond our understanding today. But since you talked about the sorrow that follows death, then may I just read from the book
Sure,
about
man. Sure. Please go ahead.
life and death? Um, I'll quote from the Katha Upanishad because that's where I've got a few quotations there, which says, "O death, there is no fear anymore, no hunger and thirst, no sorrow, no desire, no today or tomorrow, only still timelessness." This is Nachiketa to Yama, the Lord of Death, in Katha Upanishad. So, and Asariri this happens after the tsunami in 2004, where a large number of people passed away. And Nisha, the protagonist, she's wondering why it happened. Why should such things happen? And she turns to Asariri, and then he responds, the aftermath of this disaster is a tragedy. Indeed, it's worth your while to question why. But why should death per se cause dismay? For all that lives today must die someday. He's a bit of a poet, and so that's how he speaks.
Yeah.
Have no fear of death. There is no fear once you understand. Just as drops of water do not cling to a lotus leaf, so no fear clings to one who knows and understands. The truth is, I've skipped a few and come here. The truth is that both life and death are an ongoing journey. All life ends in death. And that is the ultimate truth. Just as a caterpillar eats and crawls into a sleepy pupa, and then the pupa grows wings in a chrysalis and metamorphoses into a butterfly. And then the butterfly flits a while and finally flies across the rainbow to naught. Just as a tender leaf, jade green in spring, turns a delightful russet gold, then brown as it leaves the tree and floats away with the autumn wind. And then it swirls and dances without care as it falls to mingle with the dust. So a child is born, wailing and kicking, dependent for survival on another. Then the child grows and evolves and builds a life of her own, and finally dies and traverses the ether to a new destination across the horizon. And then he goes on to say a few other things about how life progresses to death. But then he says life is beautiful and so is death. Both life and death, afterlife, are a continuum. Afterlife is life beyond death, are a continuum. If one is exquisitely beautiful, why should the other not be? Life and death are different facets of the cycle of life. Life itself is infinite, for it exists beyond birth and death. So my life on this earth is finite, as I said, but life itself is infinite. Yet the time that you spend on the earth during your lifetime is finite. Experience the beauty, grow, learn, and evoke, and become a better you. Take full responsibility of your own life choices. Live beyond yourself. Make a positive difference. And when you depart, leave behind your footprints in the sand of time. For when a person dies, she does not suffer pain in death. Now, this is what you said about sorrow. Straight after
Yeah.
someone dies, what happens? So, when a person dies, she does not suffer pain in death. Just as the sun reflected in water does not suffer from the movement of the water. The outer body of your father, she cried, she's talking about her father, so he talks about the father. The outer body of your father withered away. You and all those who loved and respected him gathered sanded wood and burnt his dead body and then immersed the ashes in the Ganges. He felt no pain when those he loved lit the pyre, nor when you cast away his bones and ashes. What died and what you burnt is but a shell. Your father, his core, true self, is not dead. What has gone forever is the tangible exterior, a part of what that he left behind, but not the real him. The part of what he left behind is also the thoughts and the vision. So don't cry or be anguished over the loss of a mere mortal body that is of no use to him. He's gone. The true self of a person is immortal. It merely transcends its physical form. The true self is eternal and infinite, and it lives on forever. So when it lives
Beautiful.
on forever, why the sorrow? Where the sorrow? In fact, wish
Absolutely.
it happiness in the journey, the afterlife. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, it's human attachment that brings that sorrow, but obviously, if the understanding can be like you read out just now, It's beautiful and superior. But Dhira ma'am is congratulating you, ma'am. I must mention some of the comments which I can see. Rajni, it's great to watch you talk about your literary journey. So happy. That's Dhira ma'am. And Serena Sidhu is saying, good evening, ma'am. Enjoying your deep and thoughtful experiences about writing. God bless. Then we've got Om Mega Film saying, so well said, happiness is actually when we stop chasing. And we've got lots of other friends of yours watching. And Lipi Parida ma'am is saying, somewhere out there is a place beyond right doing and wrongdoing. I'll meet you there. She mentions your name, Rajni. Love the conversation. And I'm going to invite Niharika back, ma'am, just to ask a couple of more questions because I think we are 40 minutes into it. Niharika, we have about 5 minutes to go, so here you are again.
Sure. Well, it didn't feel like 40 minutes at all.
We can't
It's
see
been such
you,
a delightful.
Niharika. Can we? Okay.
Right, sorry, sir.
Can we see
You're
you?
not visible. No, you're not
You're
visible,
not
Niharika.
visible, Niharika. You're not
I'm not
visible.
visible, but oh, okay. I don't
Just go
know.
back.
It says I'm on screen right now from the
Okay,
back
go
end.
back and come back. We can't see your camera somehow.
Yeah, just a minute.
Yeah, ma'am. So
Yeah.
I guess a lot of the CLS members like Colonel Chima and others had also asked some questions and given some compliments. Niharika, we can't see you, but we can hear you. So go ahead. Maybe it becomes better in a while. Go ahead and
I
speak.
hope so. Yeah, yeah. Can you see me now? I've gone
We
back
can
and
hear
I've come
you.
back.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can see you now.
yeah.
Now we can see you.
Okay, okay. All right, great. Yeah. Yeah, so it's been such a wonderful conversation, like I was saying, and it didn't feel like 40 minutes into it. But I think just one last question now. So, what's coming up, ma'am, and what are you working on at the moment?
Wow. Thank you. So, yeah, so one was prolific during this lockdown. There were two ways to the lockdown. One could have been just sit back and say, "Good Lord, what do I do?" The other was we brought out the Haunting Himalayas and then Asari, and then the third one that's coming out, which is again a COVID lockdown book, is called Office what Women of Influence 10 IS Careers. It's a penguin that should be out in the month of November. It's already gone to print. I've just finished sending off a manuscript about this is one for children. I've written not children so much as adolescents and young adults. It's called Nanak Sakhis, and these are Nanak, to me, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most rational, wise, wonderful human beings. You just need to understand him. I've actually lived his, gone through every little piece of document that I could get about him, anything I could see, anything I could hear, to the Paijis of the Gurdwaras. I owe a lot of people. But the stories that have been told about Nanak's childhood and about what he said are all oral. So I've put them down in writing because oral stories, it's a very good tradition. Only with time, what happens is that they gather a little excess, the core gets surrounded by a certain amount, certain elements which may not be true. So I've tried to excise those and build stories that are worth relating and telling youngsters. That should be out soon. So that's the other thing that I intend to do.
Wonderful. Looking forward to November. I think it should be here soon. And you've also got a YouTube channel, Fragrant Words, which you started recently. So, do we hope to see any more videos on that as well?
Yes, it's like I got pushed into it. When I've been writing poetry, I think some of my publishers have been telling me it's a revenue negative stream, and they've published them. They've enjoyed publishing it, but it's only when they really like your poems that they go out and publish them. And it's a fact that they do lose money on it because poetry is a dying genre. Very few people read, and I was told that it's better to at least put it out where people hear it because people visit YouTube more often than they read books. I'm actually also what I really is going to happen soon is a non-commercial, free to download website, a YouTube kind of. think it's called a website, and attached to a YouTube channel, which is for children. Uh, Both tiny. I thought Humpty Dumpty's out fallen too often, so some poetry that needs to be more more relatable to today's time, and some stories and short stories and rhymes, etc. For kids. Not necessarily. There are three genres for the tiny tots, and there's a space, a safe place for youngsters to write and ask questions they cannot put to their parents and to sometimes even to teachers and friends. So should be bringing that out. It's called a dandelion dream. Should be out soon. That's the next thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful, ma'am. So I think it's been a great evening. Thank you so much for joining us on CLS Conversations, and we look forward to many more with you. With every book that you get out, we look forward to a conversation attached to that. And thank you so much, Vivek, sir, for joining us as well. I think your
Thank
questions added that
you.
extra layer of depth.
Thank you, Niharika. I'll just like to say that it's been a pleasure to host Rajni ma'am today. And I do remember one event at the UT guest house, which was also very beautiful. And I'm sure that more power to your pen and your keyboard, ma'am. And keep writing and keep inspiring us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vivek and Niharika. A pleasure always. Thank you to City Beautiful Chandigarh. Just as I said, a place where my heart lies. Thank you all. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.